You know, last Sunday we looked at one of my favorite parables of Jesus. And I was so excited about doing that parable again that I decided I was going to write my own parable for this Sunday. So here's my parable. And there are some things in life that are tragic, and this is a tragic story. At the end of a long conveyor line, they were throwing away Krispy Kreme donuts. You see, there was this donut plopper that makes the shape of a donut and plops it down into the oil. But every so often, the dough came out deformed and messed up, and they had to throw those away. The good dough went into the fryer, started to cook on one side, and then halfway through had these levers that just turn it over. But there were a few donuts that refused to turn over. And they got picked up and thrown away. And in the last step, there's this glaze process. There's this beautiful river of glaze that just flows down, but sometimes the donut strays too far away, and it gets thrown away. And sometimes the spray gets all clogged up with junk, and it doesn't get covered, and it too gets thrown away. And it just doesn't seem fair in life that a donut who has traveled so far would be thrown away before they reach the finish line. Thankfully, though, there are the donuts who make it to the end in a pristine, perfect, and delicious Krispy Kreme donut. Now, that's my parable today, and I'm not going to be offended if you enjoy today's parable from Jesus better. But they are both very similar, and I'll leave it to you to figure that out. Here's the parable Jesus wants to teach us today. Same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such a large crowd gathered around him that he got in a boat and sat in it, while the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. And as he was scattering his seed, some fell along the path. It was trampled on, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky roads, places where it didn't have much soil. It sprang up quickly, but the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plant so that they did not bear grain. Still others fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 160, 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. Now that's it. For all practical purposes, the Bible says Jesus just left at that point, walked away. His disciples are not rocket scientists, and so after they left the crowds, they said to Jesus, what in the world was all that stuff about seeds and rocky ground? And maybe you're not real familiar with how Jesus taught so much of his values through these parables. But you're in luck, because in another chapter, Jesus comes back and explains this parable to these disciples who come up a little short here. Now, it says, when he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about parables, and then Jesus said to them, don't you understand this parable? How then will you understand any parable? The farmer sows the word. Some people are like seed among the path where the word is sown. As soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes the word that was sown in them. Others, like seed sown on rocky places, they hear the word and at once receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they only last a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. Still others, like seeds sown among thorns, hear the word. But the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things comes in and chokes the word, makes it unfruitful. Others, like seeds sown on good soil, hear the word. accept it and produce a crop 30, 60, or even 100 times what was sown. Now, the major part of this story today is pretty clear. Jesus is a farmer. He is spreading the word about the good news. And apparently there's 4 kinds of soil he's talking about. Hard ground, rocky soil, weed-infested soil, and good, well-kept soil. And it's clear that Jesus really isn't talking about dirt. He's talking about 4 different kinds of people and how they handle the truth. And the point seems pretty easy to figure out as well. Jesus wants as many people who will to find good soil or a receptive heart and find a place to grow and produce what Jesus calls fruit. That's awesome, I think. God, the God of the universe, wants us to produce something of value for Him while we're here on this earth. But now we need a little bit of a reality check. Because as you look around the church in America today, you will quickly discover that only a few Christians are really producing fruit in their spiritual lives. And everywhere we look, we find a lot of people who have been exposed to the Bible and its teachings, but it hadn't rubbed off. It hasn't really changed the way they live. All of us, I think, know of someone who started a Christian life, but for one reason or another, they just quit, or they never failed to grow into maturity. So a simple question: why aren't we growing fruit as we could and should? Well, the answer is very simple. Number one, we may be like the hard ground kind of people. You know, in the field between where the rows, it gets trampled, walks on. It's hard as a rock. A seed's not going to have any chance there. Birds come and eat it just like that. And, of course, in my parable is the donut plopper. It's just no place to go. I think it's clear Jesus is talking about people whose hearts are so hard that even the truth doesn't penetrate it. And just as a seed can't grow without getting to the soil, the truth is not going to change us unless it really does get into our hearts. Now, I don't think people start out to be hard-hearted. But sometimes a difficult, very difficult situation gets them down. I knew a good family in West Virginia who just absolutely gave up on God and the church after their young daughter was tragically killed in a school bus accident. Not all that long ago, I knew another Christian teen, who went to college, but somehow bought into all these thoughts of her professor and that religion in any way, shape, or form is just superstition. And no intelligent person would ever be caught dead having faith. And she left her faith. Now, truth is today, there's a lot of people who are just not open to believing in an all-powerful, wonderfully good God. And for whatever the reason, when they hear a message like this, their response is, who cares? I don't buy into that. Their hearts don't respond because for some reason, it is hard. It is hard to penetrate. Now, you will find people like that everywhere. Might have them in your own family, and very often they're good and respectful people. They might even be your own next door neighbor. They do anything in the world for you, but they don't have any use for religion. Their minds are already made up. They might even be a member in somebody's church, but they go with very little enthusiasm or commitment. And if you're anywhere near the hard ground, my prayer is with you today that God will give you understanding. Bad things happen to good people in life. That is life. This is not heaven. This is earth. And bad things happen to good people all the time. So hang in there. We all face accidents. We all face disaster. We all face diseases, disappointments. And my prayer is that you will give God a chance to be with you through these hard times, because the seed does no good on a hard ground. But now the second reason is because we may be closer to the rocky soil kind of people. Now, we're not talking about karst, where just rocks pop up in a field. This is a field. It's where the soil is only 6-8 inches above, if that much, above solid bedrock. In Israel, lots of Israel is like that. Seeds can grow. They can grow for a while, but not for very long, because there's no place for the roots to grab on. And for some reason, these folk, they start out in the right direction with the truth, but it doesn't really take a hold on them. They're the ones that don't actually get flipped like they're supposed to in life. Because to be a Christian, to be a strong Christian, you have to start developing a strong root system. If you're not putting down roots in your faith, then your faith is not going to hold you there. You're going to get blown away by every wind and scheme, as Paul would say somewhere else. But it's also going to leave you with nothing but emotionalism. It's going to make you feel good when everything is going good, but you will be devastated when trouble or persecution comes. We talked about emotions a lot here at Community. And God has given us emotions, and emotions are a wonderful, wonderful thing. And while God often uses our emotions, we have to be careful, because emotions can lead you away from the truth. Now, here's what I'm saying. The point of everything is not for you to come to church each Sunday and feel good about God. Now, I really want you to come to church every Sunday and feel good about God, but that's not the purpose of Christian faith. I would rather you more become committed to this God who runs and owns and built the universe. And emotions should take us to action. But if we only stay in the shallow soil, if we never go any further, if we choose, I don't want to do Bible study, I don't have time to read my Bible, no, I don't want to talk to somebody else about their faith. And if we stay in the shallow soil, what's going to happen is that we're going to want all the benefits of knowing God without any of the obligations of serving God. We want our sins forgiven. We want to die and go to heaven and live in heaven forever. But we don't want God messing with our week, Monday through Saturdays. And that's a shallow mentality. And it's just not going to work. You've been in church more than a few years. You know from experience that people who won't put down some roots or won't or can't even, they don't stay in church long. When sickness or pain happens, they will blame God and they will leave. And when they can't handle something within their emotions, again, it is the church that most likely will get the blame. And they're devastated. A shallow-rooted Christian faith simply cannot survive times of trouble. You put down roots to your Christian faith by simply learning more about God and putting it in practice. A Krispy Kreme has to cook on both sides. That's just a fundamental law of the universe. And a Christian has to have faith that produces action. You can't just believe. The belief has to take you somewhere. Well, a third reason, maybe we got a lot of weeds in our life. We're growing good, off to a good start, but these weeds start growing up around us. And you don't have to be a farmer to realize how quick weeds can just destroy whatever it is you're trying to grow. They choke the water, consume the nutrients. Everything the plant needs to survive, the weeds steal. Now, in any parable, and we'll learn more about this as you go through them in our study about parables. In every parable, you have to be careful because not everything is important. Not everything means something. And some people says, oh, this has got to mean this has got to mean that. And people can go crazy just trying to over-dissect what Jesus is teaching. Don't worry about it today because Jesus says. He explains it. He says, these weeds are the worries of life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things. Now, you look at any part of our society today and see that we got a lot of weeds and thorns to worry about. For some, it's wealth. They never can get enough. For others, it's just substance, things. Never have enough. These days, the search for power and prestige, influence is one of those words that we're adding into our vocabulary now. That expands and it chokes out a lot of their own lives. And I got to say, be careful here. I've seen a lot of good things choke out good plants. I've seen hobbies become more important than a church. I've seen entertainment become more important than a church. I've seen even family activities become more important than your faith. And little by little, these weeds and thorns, they just choke out this desire you have to be a person of faith. And before you know it, just one day you wake up and it's not that important to you anymore. And I guarantee you, if you've been in the church for any length of time, you have seen someone significant to your life that you thought was a true believer just toss it and walk away. Tragic thing. There's nothing more tragic than my parable that says it's horrible to see a perfectly formed donut not used for its ultimate purpose. But you understand what we're talking about here today. It's a lot more than a donut, of course. It's people. Strong believers just give up. And they walk away. And don't you say, it'll never happen to me, because I have had people tell me that. And it happened to them. What's sad here is the soil is just fine. People here have every opportunity to grow. And they are growing until some other thing starts to choke it out. Well, number 4, let's give you the final point. The question is just, are we actually growing good fruit by being in good soil? Soil's the seed is the same. There's nothing wrong with the seed. It's God's truth. It's sown all the way across the boards. Everybody gets it, that God has no favorites. Sowed it everywhere. The only difference is where the seed is found. And like we said, some people just didn't want it because the ground's too hard. Some people accept it gladly and start to grow, but for some reason or another, they don't have the willingness or the space to grow. And others accept it and grow, only to be choked out with things. Fortunately, a lot of people just stick it out and grow and produce fruit. Now, a lot of people see this parable as negative. Oh, look at all the seed that was wasted. Look at all the people who reject it. I think Jesus is just being very practical here. Not everyone who hears the truth about God and Jesus immediately come to faith in God and Jesus. It is a process, and it's a process that won't happen unless you give it a chance to happen. And a lot of people just, it doesn't work for them. And I think Jesus is trying to address that. Now, some people like to use this parable to point out Oh, look at all them people over there who got choked out by the weeds and storms. They are just such poor Christians. Oh, look at so-and-so who started out and then he just left. Boy, I knew he would never make it. Unfortunately, we have a lot of judgmental people sometimes. Truth is, it's a positive. This is a promise. Jesus says, if you will just stick it out, you just hang in there, I promise you that you will bear fruit. 100 times what's planted. Good fruit. This parable is all about what Jesus wants to do in your life. God can change anybody, but you have a part in that. He's not going to change you without your assistance and your permission. And then at the end of the parable, Jesus says this, he who has ears, let him hear. They tell me that's an idiom. It's actually a phrase in the first century, the way Jesus spoke. It simply means that if you understand what I'm saying, then please obey it. If you have ears to hear, you need to hear. So what are you and I going to learn from this parable today? What is it will keep us in that great soil, growing without those weeds bothering us? Well, in a lot of situations, it is you. It is you and I as the church encouraging one another in this process, in this journey, reminding each other just how important it is to stay on the path. Why don't you stand up as Timmy leads us to a final song this morning, if you would.